Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and it is pretty late on a Thursday night. I decided to try an experiment this evening. I am still officially on a short hiatus, which means, of course, I'm constantly putting out content. I'm on hiatus from regular stuff, and sometimes when I have a little more free time on these vacations, I get ideas in my head for new things to try, and I will sometimes use this as a proving ground for those ideas. So bear with me. Thanks for your patience. Hope you enjoy tonight's sudden random program. But not so random, I should say. Tonight, I'm going to take a look at Spawn number 1, which, of course, I've talked about at length in the past. I did an entire series on Spawn comics, going from the first issue all the way through 1 or 20, and or was it 220, I guess. And it's been so long now, I'm sitting here like, how many issues was it? And of course, a lot of side books and video games, and I covered a million things with Spawn. It's a thing that I've thought about, here and there, mostly in connection to that insane 2-year-long project that I did, but I haven't gone back to the material. And in fact, I sold my Spawn collection years ago, and still somewhat regret that a little bit. It was a killer collection. I owned everything. I had every issue up to current. I had all of Sam and Twitch. I had all the miniseries. I had everything. And partly because of just how traumatizing, to some degree, some of the material was, just how insane it made me trying to make sense of a lot of it. I decided that when I got a pretty good offer to sell it, I decided, this isn't material I want to go back to. It might be nice to spend that money on something different, collection-wise, and that's what I did. I started my Batman Pop collection, among other things. Anyway, then, you get kind of rose-tinted glasses about things. You start to have nostalgia for things that you did in the past, and I kind of miss it to some degree, as nonsensical as I know a lot of the material is, as not coherent and cohesive and retconny as the whole thing is. I sometimes kind of miss it, and the art, if nothing else. As I've always said, Todd McFarlane is my favorite artist of all time, my favorite comic artist. He is my least favorite comic writer, although there are some other contenders now since Spawn Year, as I've continued to read comics, and I think there's some, I won't name names right now, but there's some writers in more recent years that I think, just based on particular things, kind of rival him. But I think Todd McFarlane is consistently not a very good writer. This first issue notwithstanding, because I think it's a pretty solid thing. Anyway, tonight I thought I'd try a thing that I've never done before. I don't know if this is a thing that anybody else does, but I thought I'd make the attempt. I'm going to do basically a comic book commentary. So I'm not prepared for this. I'm not reviewing this issue again. I didn't, or at least the way I usually would, I didn't sit down and reread this. I'm going to do something of a dramatic reading of this, and then give you some commentary as we go along. So fine-tooth comb. I'm going to read this again out loud to you and comment on it as I go along. This may be a horrible idea. This may be another ill-advised exercise, but hopefully it is enjoyable. And I don't know how long it's going to take to get through this whole thing with whatever diatribes might come to mind as I go along, but we're going to go page by page, kind of like Dan and I used to do with Spider-Man, except, again, I have not prepared for this. You're going to get my kind of raw thoughts as something of a reaction video for the first time in 10 years since I've looked at this. So you might be thinking, if you're familiar with Spawn Year, well, Cap, why didn't you save this for the anniversary? Because believe it or not, if you haven't been keeping track of time, Spawn Year is 10 years old next year. I don't understand how that date is upon us already, but the reason I wanted to go ahead and do this, besides just I thought of it and I felt like doing it, I thought it might be fun, I decided not to put it off, because this is around the time that I started working on that project in the first place. So I was 2 or 3 whole weeks into written reviews with Spawn Year before I started posting, and for those of you that aren't aware of this, and I started writing Spawn Year at the beginning of August, so we're just a week away from the 10th anniversary of when I began working on this project. And again, I've not read this first issue since then. So anyway, let's go ahead and get right into this. Like I said, I'm going to read it down, and I'm going to pause every so often to give you my comments and reaction responses, getting another new impression of this for the first time in 10 years. So here we go. Here is Spawn number 1 with that classic brilliant cover. I've always believed that Todd McFarlane's brilliant work with just this cover has a lot to do with why it sold 1 million copies. Obviously, the popularity of him on Spider-Man had a lot to do with that too, because I believe his Spider-Man number 1 also did 1 million copies around the same time as Jim Lee's X-Men was doing those kinds of numbers. This is, of course, the digital edition, as you see with the cover there, and I don't know if anything new has really been done to remaster the colors or anything. It looks about as I remember it. Let's go ahead and get into it. Here we go. Thanks for watching live. If you're doing that, I know it's really super late at night. This was when I had time to sit down and do something fun, and so here we are. Thanks for watching after the fact if you're doing that. Leave comments on this video later on if you are so inclined, and let me know what you think of this as an experiment and an exercise, and I will consider doing more of this kind of thing, both for things that I've read in the past and also things that I've not looked at yet at all. Do something of a reaction and commentary on a comic book. Here we go. All right, so of course, the title of this story was Questions, and we've got story pencils and inks by Todd McFarlane, letters by Tom Orzechowski, who continued lettering. I want to say he still is, like, all the way up till now. I believe he also created the logo, which is, of course, brilliant and striking, and certainly has something to do with the success of this series. And this was dedicated to Jack Kirby, who had just passed away before this came out in 1992. And we just talked about Jack Kirby on a show this last week on the Captain Logan Show with a local thespian group doing a play about Jack Kirby, so kind of fitting that I'm doing this now. It's super classy that he puts Jack Kirby in big letters there, and kind of interesting just how history works out, that like the torch is kind of being passed to yet another generation, just as some of the major players, one of the biggest, arguably most important, real-life characters in comic books passes away, just as Todd McFarlane is kind of taking the world by storm. All right, here we go. So Spawn has amnesia and is trying to figure out what the heck is going on and where he is, and I will now read as Al Simmons. Hopefully you can see this okay on your screen, and I might occasionally zoom in on some things. I don't belong. Not here, not now. I have to get back there. The bet was rigged. He made me believe. He made me believe. Now, so you got the comma there, and I'm going to do this some with McFarlane's writing, because there's some vagueness. Does the comma there mean that Malbolgia, the devil, made Spawn believe that the bet was rigged, or that he made me believe in something else, in the fact that he was going to get to see his wife again? I'm not totally sure syntax-wise what that means. Now there's darkness in my soul. I want to die again. And those words become the lyrics of the beginning of the first track on Iced Earth's Spawn album, Spawn concept album. If you've never listened to that, I love it a lot. I still go back to it quite a bit. It's called The Dark Saga, and they lift some dialogue straight out of this issue for the lyrics of that song. But I chose to come back. Why? Really like the panel layouts here with the kind of full page spread, but then the real cinematic kind of quick cut shots at the bottom. I'm not sure what the point of the straight black box is, because I mean, maybe it's just it's you're on Spawn's face and he's got his eyes closed, and then you've got lightning, and so you can see his silhouette, but it's complete darkness when he's not looking. I'm not sure, or maybe we're just looking at the black sky there. I don't know for sure, but again, there is darkness in his soul, so it's clear what the dark box must represent. And now we get to the boring part. I think, if memory serves, there's a couple of pages of this, so bear with me. I never loved this as a storytelling technique entirely. We'll talk about it. Sometimes it's a somewhat convenient and useful way to provide exposition, because you have a character who isn't really talking to anybody much of the time, and so you've got to create some context for what's going on in the world. And of course, this goes back to Miller, who does this with Dark Knight Returns and some other things, but I don't think his tends to be as overwritten as McFarlane's, and McFarlane will kind of go off on some diatribes, and it feels like social commentary maybe about something, but then isn't doing enough to drive story forward or to really talk about anything that's going to be of much consequence to our protagonist. Services were held today for Lieutenant Colonel Al Simmons. This is, of course, the lady at the top talking. We have 3 different talking heads who represent 3 different types of journalists and media. Al Simmons at Arlington Cemetery in Virginia. So this text is really tiny. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit so that it's a little bit easier for us to read here. Simmons is best known for his courageous involvement in saving the president from an assassination attempt. So was he just involved in that? Did it take, several people to do that, or did he do it all on his own? I don't know. Simmons rose through the ranks of the Marine Corps following his service overseas. His memory was honored by both the president and vice president, maybe somewhat ironic, given that he now has no memory of any of this, as well as hundreds of officers from all the armed services. His wife, Wanda Blake, so we're setting up all the major players that are going to be important here, remained quiet for the duration of the funeral, but seemed to need help during the end of the proceedings. Friends and family have all been supportive and will start a new scholarship fund in his name that will benefit the United Negro College Fund. I hadn't thought of this before, but one thing I kind of appreciate about that is that actually does give us quite a bit of information that will be relevant and tells us right away that Al Simmons is a black man, if you're paying attention to that. Not something you'd be able to tell from his silhouette or even later on his face, because it's all charred and mangled, and at some point he will come out and say, hey, I'm a black man, but I don't think that's even in this issue. So that's, I don't know, somewhat efficient storytelling, I suppose. Gotta give it the accolades where it has them, because it all goes downhill from here to some degree, although these first few issues are better than some things later on. Anyway, I'm having PTSD right now thinking about the series and Spawn here. Lieutenant Colonel Simmons, who disappeared from... So this is now, this guy, my view on too. He will find himself working for a number of different news agencies as he constantly gets fired for being too bombastic. Lieutenant Colonel Simmons, who disappeared from public view shortly after the Hinckley incident, was believed to have been involved with numerous covert government task forces. Maybe I should give this guy a voice. I didn't think of that. I haven't been, so I guess I won't. Informed sources say that his presence in Botswana at the same time as Youngblood agents was no coincidence. Youngbloods will come up a few times in this issue and in the first several issues, as Image is attempting to build a shared universe which it will mostly abandon later until it tries to kind of bring it back together with Image United down the line years and years after this, which never finishes and never really comes to fruition. And there's some different crossovers here and there with different stuff. So Image doesn't really have a shared universe, but sometimes they cheat and kind of pretend like they do. Frankly, this stinks of a government cover-up, so what else is new? Though I'm sure Lieutenant Colonel Simmons was a man of courage and integrity, it's the government's boys' club attitude that appalls me. Information is given out at their discretion in an almost Hollywood-type fashion, and we all know how movie makers never stretch the truth. Funny how maybe at that time what he just said would seem more controversial than arguably it does now. And then we have this fashion guy at the bottom, or I think sometimes he's played as like a fashion reporter, and sometimes a Hollywood reporter, and I think McFarlane struggles a lot to make him seem relevant in commenting on things because that are happening in the book, because they won't always have anything to do with entertainment or show business, but he's one of the three talking heads, so he has to find some way in. Let's see how he does it here. And the lovely Wanda Blake was absolutely divine in a disarmingly simple jet black Giovanni original. I'm sure I botched that. And say, who was that tall, dark, and handsome prince on her arm at the ceremony? Well, a little bird told me that Martin Alexander was Wanda's closest friend back in high school. He introduced her to Al Simmons at the Republican Convention in 1984, which was the year I was born. Wow, this guy just has no integrity or class, and he's not even pretending like he does. This is all in very poor taste. Let's critique fashion at a funeral. All right. Well, where this potential affair is leading remains to be seen. We'll be keeping an eye out. As for you, Mr. Martin Alexander, shame, shame on you. Let the poor woman grieve. I always love bold words in comic books that don't always seem to be necessarily where the emphasis would naturally be put on a thing. And yes, every time we have a bold word, I will read it that way so we can see how naturally or otherwise it reads in this melodramatic context. She'll have a tough time finding a replacement for a husband voted one of, quote, the 10 sexiest men 2 years ago. Even though the government tried to hide this sweet morsel from all of us, this charismatic gentleman couldn't be kept out of sight. Okay, so one thing that always confused me about this is that Al Simmons was like a covert operative guy who I guess was also super famous and would show up on like best of or top 10 lists in magazines. I think that's very strange. We got to act like he's a movie star just so that the Hollywood guy at the bottom has something to say. It's kind of odd. But anyway, let's move on to the next page, shall we? I remember there. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading as Spawn, so I will do a little bit of a voice for Spawn. He's brooding. I just gotta get in character. I remember there was someone to love, someone to hate. And I was something special. This is starting to read like the beginning of an Arrow episode. And proud of it for a time. Then they turned on me. He turned on me. I remember dying. So yeah, a lot of Spawn's internal monologue is going to be real melodramatic like this, of course, and McFarlane loves that word melodrama. He makes no bones about that's what he sees, at least at this time, the comic medium as being for, and so this kind of overwritten and kind of, overwrought, sometimes sappy, real over-the-top kind of dialogue is par for the course in what the kind of modern convention of the medium, asks for, expects. And so he makes no apologies for it, but even for the conventions of the time, very often he would go too far, and this is a place where it might have been time to, elevate some of that. And that's not to say that there were no comics that did that. Of course, you compared this to something like Watchmen or most of Alan Moore's work and stuff, and it looks like maybe he's making excuses for the way he's writing and for his lack of maturity and experience, as opposed to that just being the way it was done at the time. But I don't think he is making an excuse when he said that in interviews and letters pages and things. I think that's really how he saw it. And her, oh God, she is so beautiful. I love the lettering in this book, all the attention to detail in changing like font type and writing certain words to look just completely different than the rest of it, to accentuate it and to emphasize things and to give you a real sense just visually of what's on a person's mind and what things they're finding most important in the moment. It also makes the words part of the artwork, which I always really appreciated. I needed, he gave. It's like a rated R Dr. Seuss book. I had to. Okay, we get it. You made a deal with the devil. You sold your soul so you could see your wife again. All I could think of was her. So I promised, and he accepted, all because of her. And now she's in inverted colors for some reason. This is one of my favorite pages. I guess I have to say panel layout. It's cool because this is a full-page spread. Looks almost like a pinup, but we are using, or McFarlane, I should say, using panels in really creative ways because it's not really panels. It's more like using the squares to give you a sense of memories and flashes, and Spawn's brain being all detached and disconnected, discombobulated, and so it's one image with what feels like comic panels in the middle of it. So he's getting really inventive with the form, being kind of abstract with it. Damn his lies. I will, by the way, have to swear anytime swearing comes up in the book, so just warning for that. This will not be the most family-friendly thing, of course. I don't plan to swear intentionally on my own in a video like this, but I have to read what's there. There will be a B word later, I think. He accepted the deal on his terms, his rules, his way. Yep. Because he's the devil. And somewhere in time, he busts a gut laughing. Okay, I didn't remember that Spawn says somewhere in time before the narrative text on the page does later on, that it's kind of giving you a timestamp that's outside of Spawn's head, or presumably outside of Spawn's head. So I think that's funny and kind of interesting. That he's using that word choice, because I always thought that was real silly, because Malbolgia does seem to see things, in the same sequence as we do. It's chronological, but every time we see him, he's somewhere in time. It's like, I think somewhere in time is, right now. I get what you're saying, that hell is, detached from reality. It's its own realm, but time seems to move at the same speed there as it does anywhere else, so. We also have our first glimpse, unless we had it earlier and I missed it, of the Spawn clock at the bottom. It's still at 9999, and that's a thing that McFarlane wasn't able to stay very consistent with. We'll talk about that when we see it again. And there it is at the top of the page there, just in case you missed it at the bottom there. It's cut off. It's pretty subtle there. What is not subtle is the symbolism of the hourglass. Anyway, so you got the Spawn clock at the top. It looks very different from what it's going to look like later. It looks like almost a proto-Spawn clock, because that becomes a real iconic image for Spawn. I love Spawn's pose here. This is another wonderful page. I can kind of say this about nearly every page in this issue. It's a masterpiece as far as the artwork is concerned. But it's these poses are so wonderfully dramatic, and it's atmospheric and broody, and it puts you in a mood every time you read it. I almost at the beginning of this did the Todd McFarlane thing that he would say at the beginning of an episode of the cartoon show when he did the openings for the first 2 seasons, I think, when he'd say, you're watching Spawn, so turn out the lights. So yeah, turn out the lights, but I'm not gonna keep the light out. Yeah, he gave me power, but he robbed me of my memories. If I can just find her, then I'll know what this is about. But I can't even remember who she is. And I said this in Spawn Year, but I always have a hard time not kind of tuning out as soon as you get into amnesia territory like this because I don't know where I stand with my protagonist, and I always worry that you're just going to have to kind of sit around until he figures out who he is, and then once he does, now he's a character. None of this makes any sense. Truer words will never be spoken. I mean, so far, don't get me wrong, the narrative itself makes enough sense. Like, I know what's happening. He hasn't, contradicted himself or done anything super stupid yet. But I think it's really funny that with this series, in the first issue, you get that line. None of this makes any sense. A handful of images darting in my mind, and comic panels, no less. That's it. That's all I have of my life. I keep forgetting to go deeper. I feel I can do anything at all with my power, but why can't I remember? She'll know who I am. So he's got memories of having a wife and wanting to see her, but doesn't remember much of anything else. He could get real creative and try to use his power to remember, concentrate real hard. But I'm going to assume that that's one of the few things Malbolgia won't let him do, and would be a difficult thing to depict visually, of course. So I mentioned pinups earlier. Now we get basically what is just a straight-up pinup. A lot of Spawn issues in the early days will have these cool posters that aren't part of the issue that you could take out and put on a wall. This is basically one of those with just a little bit of internal monologue. I'm going to find her, all right, and when I have some answers, I'm going to find him, the one who framed me. So this gets a little murky until you've met Jason Wynn, and I think we'll see an image of him later, and so it might become a little clearer that we're talking about two different people here, but he's been using the pronoun he a lot. He's talking about the deal with the devil, who he's not name-dropped yet because he doesn't know what his name is, and I mean, part of the problem is our protagonist doesn't know anything except these little flashes of things that he's getting from his life. So it's going to be difficult for him not to just throw out the same pronoun over and over again if we keep talking about male characters. But I could see a reader on a first read not realizing that the guy he's talking about at the bottom of this page is not the same as the devil who made this terrible deal with him, especially because he was cheated by both of these characters. But, when your memory's all fragmented, what exactly are you going to do? I think it probably becomes clear enough as it goes along. Again, another wonderfully dynamic pose. The choice to have Spawn actually hold his cape up in the air like that is part of what makes it so exciting, I think. And now we get to Sam and Twitch. Let me once again zoom in a little bit on this so that it's easier to read. Okay, Twitch, let's try this one more time. You're telling me that somebody threw Carlo Giamatti from a window. Through a window, sir. You got kind of a Laurel and Hardy thing, Abbott and Costello going on with Sam and Twitch. You get a lot of great banter from them early on, and a lot of the comic relief comes from our detective characters, as black humor as it sometimes is. Through a window on the 34th floor. 44th, sir. And he wasn't killed by the fall? No, sir. It was his heart. Heart failure? You might say that, sir. It was removed. Oh, I forgot that this was set up in the first issue with Violator. Spoiler alert, but Violator is going around ripping people's hearts out, and you'll see that in all of its gruesome detail in the next issue. Removed? Yes, sir. It was stuffed in his mouth. I think McFarlane does a good job of letting the reader know pretty early just how rough and tumble this is going to be, but he also eases us into it. So we have, and I haven't thought about this before, but we have characters talking about gruesome, grotesque, terrible, horrifying things before we actually see those things show up on the page. So in one sense, it makes it more shocking because you're just, using your imagination and reading about these grotesque things that in 1992 you may or may not have ever seen or expected to see in a comic book. Not to say that there's not any violent or gruesome things in comics before this. Obviously, there's plenty, but this is more mainstream than a lot of the things that would be doing that, at least around this time. Of course, this doesn't have the Comics Code seal on it, and million copies sold. There were certainly some children that got their hands on this, but it also kind of braces you for it a little bit as well, which I guess I kind of admire about it. Twitch, yes, sir. We got 3 dead hitmen in the last 48 hours, and you're trying to be a comedian. I don't need that. No, sir. I ain't complaining, mind you. Somebody's saving me a lot of work. I figure we got ourselves either a grade A wacko or the best damn volunteer cop in New York City. Probably both. Yes, sir. It's a hell of a town, Twitch. Yes, sir. And then we're back to Spawn. No kind of transition between those scenes. Makes it feel somewhat cinematic, I think. And kind of refreshing, honestly, to go back to a book like this that isn't constantly taking dialogue from the bottom of a page or from the last characters that you just read at the bottom of a page and putting it at the top of the next to give us a transition. That gets a little bit repetitive and sing-songy to me. Like, I get kind of tired of always seeing that kind of transition in modern comics, and I think even this series does do that some, and maybe even going back almost this far, but not every time, and I do kind of appreciate that. Boys, looks like she's got enough for all of us. Okay, so now I'm gonna have to read rapist dialogue. Okay, so I'm not gonna do this every time, but I'll just put out a caveat. I'm just reading what's on the page, okay? There's like these rapist people that are being more than horribly sexist and are trying to rip this woman's clothes off and do horrible sexual things to her, okay? This is not coming from me. I'm just reading what's on the page. Okay. Fortunately, I get first dibs. And then she's screaming, of course, no, please don't. Shut up, bitch. Back off, guys. I got me an idea. So, see, we're supposed to be excited to see these people get eviscerated by Spawn because they're very one-dimensional, terrible alley thugs. Wait a sec. Let's see how loud the tramp can scream after I cut out her tongue. I'm getting RoboCop flashbacks right now. I want a closer look while the body's still warm. And then here comes Spawn. And he's going to take these guys out before I have to read any more, horrifyingly sexual dialogue. Get out now, or you're all dead. One thing that always struck me about Spawn when I was a kid, and yes, I did read my first Spawn comic when I was like 10. I've told this story before in an In Spawn year, I think, but the first Spawn comic I read was issue 29, which I believe, it's been a long time, but I'm pretty sure that's the number, which is the famous I Beat My Kids issue, and it haunted me forever, and it still does to this day to some degree, and it was a thing that made me kind of afraid to look at this material, but also way too curious, and it left like a negative and positive impression on me because, it's about a guy beating his kids and Spawn punishing that guy, and it was real messed up, but it was also, the artwork was brilliant, and it in weird ways, I guess, kind of resonated with me. And so anyway, one thing that issue kind of made my imagination run away with itself with is the way Spawn's dialogue is bolded, and the bold word balloons immediately invokes a particular voice in my head, which I think the HBO Spawn series got, rock solid. Like, that was Keith David. Like, that's the voice I imagine, or a voice like that, when I looked at that dialogue. And ever since then, there are certain characters in comics that I always think really need to have balloons like that to distinguish the way they talk from other characters. What the hell? Hey, Shank, looks like one of them young bloods. No, his costume is way too cool and way too not generic to be a young blood. Who cares? Check this out, guys. Maybe at some point we'll do this with young bloods. I've heard that first issue is absolutely insane and doesn't make any sense at all, and is impossible to make out. I'm gonna carve me a super You're gonna carve a what? Again, really cinematic and really creative panel layouts. It's real clear what's happening without words on the page explaining it to you. This guy gets grabbed and he's shocked, and Spawn is in complete control of the situation, and he gets thrown out a window, and then Spawn simply says, "Bad idea." Good stuff. Now, who's next? You crazy MF? Nobody jerks with me. So I guess I like MF better than a mature comic like this feeling the need to do the symbol thing for a swear word, which we're still doing in modern comics, and it drives me crazy because it doesn't matter sometimes, especially with DC, like just how violent and horrific a page will be. If there's an F word, or even these days the B word we're doing it with, that's going to be censored. Okay, like Black Label is doing this. I don't understand that. But I'm wondering if the idea is that he's censoring himself right now, or if he's actually saying the real words, mother effer. And we just wrote MF on the page. I don't know. Fat boy, you're way out of your league. This guy reminds me, and maybe this is an intentional homage, given that McFarlane has reverence for Miller and will use Miller on the book a few months from here. But this thug with the mohawk and the glasses reminds me a little bit of a mutant in Dark Knight Returns. Boom! I don't know what the boom was. Did he get exploded? Like, what exactly happened to him? I can't really tell. His glasses are mangled, messed up, and flying through the air, and these guys are trying to run away. Just boom! I'm going to assume that this is Spawn using his powers for the first time, right? He sticks his finger up, and then there's this weird... I don't even totally know what is happening here. This weird kind of smoke or something that goes across their faces. And then boom. They're gone. You needn't be afraid. Please don't. I'm having a hard time seeing what exactly she's saying here. Please don't. I'll do what you want. So see, she's afraid of Spawn because he doesn't look like a hero, and he's not really acting like one even though he just saved her. And then something crazy. Not again. He's having another flashback, I think. And then no. And I talked about this in Spawn Year, but I love the bubbles. It's kind of it makes the whole thing feel a little bit more cartoony when McFarlane does things like this, and it's almost like seeing stars or something. But I guess you know that something really mystical but internal is happening when there's bubbles. And now we're going to get a lot more internal monologue. Once again, your mind explodes with a searing pain. A floodgate of memories burst wide. Okay, so this is strange because we've had... all the internal monologue up until now has been from Spawn's perspective. And now all of a sudden it's in the second person, which I find really jarring. Like, I'm not saying you have to do one or the other, but there's nothing that, like, set us up for this. So I wonder if it might have been smart, if this is supposed to be Malbolgia talking, I think it is, I forget. It might have been smart to maybe put him at the top of the page, or get, like, if you don't want to reveal him in all of his devilish glory with his, big mouth and everything, it might have been smart to just put him in silhouette at the top with a word balloon, and then have his monologue, his dialogue after that, because it feels inconsistent at first, because you're like, well, it was in the first person, and now suddenly it's in the second, and I'm always real sensitive to that. Yet, it is her face that keeps haunting you. Always her face. Who is she? Then, things begin to crystallize. Okay, I'm actually not sure if this is Malbolgia talking or just McFarlane. You remember your funeral, begging and pleading for someone to release you from the darkness. You're not dead. You can't be. Then you feel her presence. Warm, caring, soothing, but somewhere deep inside she feels empty now. She has no reason, no meaning, no soul. Okay, so a lot of that seems really unnecessary. like it reads like an unreliable narrator. I don't actually know who's talking right now. It's saying a lot of things about Wanda being broken inside, and I guess we just have to take its word for it. Just got a super chat from Philip Kelton. Thanks so very much. Should Spawn get a reboot that makes sense of it? Yeah, I would like to see that, but not from McFarlane. I always wished that he would just hand it off to somebody else. Now, I've not read the more recent stuff while it's gotten popular again. I've heard from a couple of people that it's still kind of just what it always was, but for some reason people have become interested again, and he's given several side books to other writers. Maybe they're doing some better things with it. I don't know, but it's because like a lot of different versions of Spawn came together for a team book, and then a lot of them each got their own book, and I might check in on a couple of those at some point, just sample it just to see what that looks like. Although sampling Spawn when you haven't read it in a long time is always kind of dangerous and can be a mistake, because it very often reads better out of context than it does in context. But anyway, let us continue here. But your soul lives. Okay, so we're saying her soul is dead, but his soul is not dead. And that's just kind of objectively not true. While hers is dying. Oh, dying. Okay. All right. And then you get kind of our first inkling, I would argue, at a Malbolgia face or sort of a Violator face, with just this kind of generically haunting look of her at the top, like this kind of nightmare version of Wanda, where like she turns into a monster. It's kind of provocative, but it doesn't really mean anything. Like, she's not going to turn into a monster. She's not going to start acting, evil or do anything monstrous. She doesn't really fully lose herself. Like, she gets horribly traumatized, of course, don't get me wrong, but as things go on, I don't think that panel really means anything. And I never really thought to scrutinize that until just now, but it's kind of weird. And it's also hard to say if that's supposed to be a foreshadowing for what Bulgy is going to look like, or if it's just McFarlane likes to draw big mouths with huge tongues coming out of it because of venom. I don't know. And then Spawn is hyperventilating. And then there's this, what looks like, at least in this panel, half-naked lady, but I think she just has a dress on, who says, "Hey, come on, it's okay, you're all right. It's all over now." I don't know why I went with like a Vicky Vale, I love purple voice there, but whatever. Okay, now I gotta read the talking heads again. They were somewhat relevant last time. Let's see what they're like here. It's so hard not to just glaze over these when you're reading at a normal clip and not stopping every 6 seconds to ramble on about the material as I'm doing. Police are investigating the 4th gangland homicide in 2 days. The murder of Carlo Giamatti makes the 7th gangland murder this year. But Chief of Police Tim Banks denies any truth to the rumor of a possible mob war. Inside sources have also reported that the 3 most recent deaths were unlike any they had seen before. It was quoted, "Even the bad guys don't sink this low." The mystery of these deaths seem to have... Okay, so the word choice there is a little weird. She says, even the bad guys... Or she says, it was quoted... Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I read reported, but it says quoted. Okay, never mind. Let's just carry on. That's fine. And that's just straight up CNN, which is interesting, because I think later he feels the need to make up call letters for a news agency. So, of course, she's supposed to be the talking head that ostensibly just gives the facts as they are without opinion. Of course, that's unreliable. There's always potential spin, but she's not a commentator so much as just reporting the news, and then this guy's a commentator, and then the guy at the bottom is just an entertainment commentator. So he's and you don't even get like Republican and Democrat or liberal and conservative. You just get like real super right-wing guy, and then entertainment talking head, which I guess arguably you would assume is a liberal perspective, but not in the same kind of way. It's not like the super crazy far right guy and the super crazy far left guy. It's just the liberal Hollywood guy, I guess. Anyway, this might be just what this city needs, with people like Jake Morelli disguised as a well-dressed businessman. It's no wonder the police won't make any arrests. Police Chief Banks, and I can't remember if Banks is actually a character that we do anything with, or if we just named a police chief and then we kind of lose that as we go along. Oh wait, no, we do. Suddenly, it's flashing to me who that guy is. He interacts quite a bit with Sam and Twitch. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's all coming back to me. It says he'll send out an investigative unit to flesh out some answers. What's to investigate? Just because something smells now doesn't mean it wasn't garbage before. I, for one, hope the police don't find any answers, or worse yet, try and stop this latest rash of public executions. If it's good guys killing bad, or bad guys killing bad, who cares? Give me a call if you citizens need any help. So wait, has he already been fired from his last job before we got to that page? Let's go back and check, shall we? Was it 2 today, or was it something else before? Let's go back and look. Okay, no, it was the view on 2, and then it was the view 2 today. So I guess he was still on the same channel. And actually, both the bottom guys have, or the middle and the bottom guy have different logos, even though they still work for the same agencies. Okay, anyway, let's hurry up and get through the talking heads. I'm taking too long. I'll never understand how those two have managed to stay together all these years. Someone must be torturing me. I like how the first part of that word is bolded. Torturing me. And finally, word out of New York is that there's a new mystery man in the Big Apple. Only a handful of reports so far, but from what I can tell, our big bruiser has a fetish for Zorro. See, I don't think an entertainment talking head guy would be weighing in on this. I mean, let's get serious. A cape? With the Youngblood fashions being all the rage. Do you count 2 or 3 references to Youngblood so far? I think that's 3, right? Why on earth would anyone try to bring back such a gauche and totally useless accessory? Now those spikes and chains he has, those are simply darling. A perfectly riveting statement. One thing I like about I should mention this real quick. The choice of bolding to emphasize certain parts of words instead of the whole word is that we're not using phonetic spellings to do it. So you get a sense of what his cadence might be like, and you could possibly even do this with accents without having to intentionally misspell a word and bog it down and make it difficult to read. So I like that. So beautiful. But who is she? Why do I keep... This is really funny. It feels like we left a train of thought, and then we interrupted it with a couple of other things, and we came back, and he's still in the same train of thought. It's kind of unintentionally comedic to me. Why do I keep... God, no. She's my wife. I have a wife, but I can't remember anything else. I don't know what her name is, or the color of her eyes, but we were husband and wife. That's why she was grieving at the funeral. And she also apparently has no soul now, according to the second-person narrator. Or it's dying. The soul is dying. That's why she was grieving at the funeral. It was her that made me want to come back. I let my mercenary instincts take over too quickly. Okay, so you know you're a mercenary. Got too caught up in this damn costume. I'm no hero. Now, here's a thought. Does Spawn see the same news talking heads that we do? Because we're given all this exposition that our protagonist may or may not have. That's a question. It's just that everything is so different. What happened the last 5 years? I'm stranded here not knowing what's going on. Okay, so he knows it's 5 years somehow. I know I'm alive, but I can't feel it. Only thing I feel is this damn costume. Gotta get it off. Get away from it. He's gotta get away. He's got to fly away. My face felt like, Jesus, what am I? That's a real kind of iconic Spawn face at the bottom there, and kind of a cool reveal for the reader. Real old school kind of classic monster movie stuff, or even monster pulp stuff. Like the tears coming out of one side of Spawn's face there. Of course, he's going to get real whiny and mopey and not be proactive and basically do what he's doing in this panel here where he's just sitting in a back alley around garbage and doing nothing. But in this first issue, I'm finding him, and I said this in Spawn year, sympathetic enough. What am I? And now we actually do have, if not a transition, just two scenes that are happening on the same page. I don't know, Twitch, if it really is some government hero gone wacko. He's kind of got it. That's pretty much what's going on. Then Washington stiffs, or pardon me, them Washington stiffs ain't gonna let us get close. Them tight asses. But if this guy decides he wants to start snuffing out Joe Average, then we got ourselves a serious problem. And the damage this guy has done to those 3 bodies is friggin' unreal. Wonder how much power this guy has in him. I don't know what Sam thinks he means by power. Because I don't think he's expecting superpowers. I don't think he's expecting anything supernatural yet. So that word choice is kind of weird. It's maybe a little off. I'm not sure. So I mentioned the inconsistency with the Spawn clock earlier. McFarlane's already making a big mistake with this. You can't be consistent with this unless you were planning on making this like a 12-issue maxi series or something. We saw Spawn vaguely use his powers. We're not even completely sure what he did. Again, with the something, boom, dead bodies. That's all we know. He's down from 9999 to 9995. He lost 5 points at the end of the meter over that vague whatever it was he did, or 4 points, whatever it was he did. It's a neat idea. It's a cool potential gimmick. I like the idea of trying to keep track of a character's power levels like that with the ticking time bomb idea, where if he runs out of power, he's going to go to hell forever, and that's the end of it. But also, part of the point from Spawn from the beginning seemed to be the potential to keep your series going on forever because he can't die and he doesn't age, and so things could move in real time if you wanted them to. So those ideas seem potentially at loggerheads. But yeah, I always thought that was, kind of problematic. You'd have this real great sense of urgency with the timer, but you have to know that eventually it's going to get reset or just thrown out, or we'd conveniently forget about it. All those things happen. Okay, moving right along. Again, Hourglass on the nose. This is the last page, folks. Like I said, it's a hell of a town. Yes, sir. This is Twitch talking. By the way, I hear you had only 13 donuts today. Didn't know you were dieting. Shut up, Twitch. I'm not in the mood for your jokes. Yes, sir. Speaking of, this is a cool transition. We have a joke that's not funny. And then we have Malbolgia cracking up. And I wish he was actually laughing at that terrible joke. But that's not what's happening. I love the word rap. That's some kind of classic, almost Neil Adams type stuff. Ha 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 ha. He wrote out his villain laugh. Somewhere in time. So see, it's not just Spawn. I don't know who's writing that. I mean, I assume it's just a timestamp. But I also don't really know who the second person narrator was. I don't think it was Malbolgia. Ha 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 ha. Simmons, if you think you've got problems now, I promise your troubles have just begun. Ha 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 ha. I'm making him laugh like Mandark from Dexter's Laboratory. But anyway, I think so. I love this reveal of Malbolgia at the end. It's like we've got the devil, but he's not exactly what you expect, and he's got this freakish giant mouth. It's just this impossible mouth that can't close normally, but he's still got horns. So there's iconography that's familiar, but he is a brand new, very memorable creature. But I think he should have been foreshadowed earlier in Silhouette or something. But anyway, coming up on just an hour, and we got through that issue while I stopped a lot and commented on things. First issue of Spawn still holds up really well. I love going back to this. I find it pretty easy to... I mean, I talked about some things that will happen later and ways that it makes this first issue frustrating when you are thinking about everything after it, but it is pretty easy for me to sit down and look at this and put myself back in the place and time a little bit without all of the madness that I dealt with in trying to keep all the continuity straight and look at a totally incohesive piece of nonsense through Spawn Year. I just enjoy this as a piece that's ultimately not really going to work out, but it's a killer start. And yeah, it's certainly got its issues, and it's overwritten and stuff. But there's a reason it was as popular as it was, and that it grabbed everybody's imaginations. Spawny is still one of my absolute favorite designs of anything in comics. I still love the look of Spawn so much, I'm seriously considering getting a tattoo of it eventually, now that I've been getting tattoos. And, I mean, like, even though the content almost broke me during Spawn Year, I still have a, kind of special place for McFarlane's design in my heart. And, some of the ideas with the character are really interesting, even if it isn't handled super well. Philip Kelton puts in another super chat. Thanks so much. Is the timer some sort of gospel quote thing? That's interesting. I never thought about it like that, but no. I don't know that McFarlane was thinking that at all when he put that in there. But I can see why it would remind you of that. I don't know why it's 4 numbers like that. I always assumed that was kind of an arbitrary choice, but that could be where he got it from. I never thought of that. I don't think so, though. Sinclair wants to know if there will ever be a Spawn Year 2. Please, Cap. I don't think so. Or if so, I don't have plans for it now. That's all I'll say about that. I won't say that I'll never review Spawn comics again. I don't know that I will, but it could happen. I don't know. But as far as a narrative-driven thing like that for Spawn, yeah, probably not. Probably not. I never like to say never, though. One doomed game critic, but yeah, the backstory of Image's creation is the actual best for indie creators. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time through this looking at your comments, because I was just kind of focused on the material. When we do this again, maybe I'll look at comments a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up right now and just see what some other folks have been saying. Austin wants to know if the Highest Super Chatter gets to pick the next issue. I was talking to him earlier, and if I start doing this on the regular, or I don't even know if I would, but if I start occasionally doing these, or if on the regular, I don't know what I'm doing with this yet. I am kicking that around. Letting the having kind of a super chat goal and letting the Highest Super Chatter of the night pick the next comic to do in this format. But I kind of just wanted to do a little pilot for this and see how it went before I instituted that. So I'll pick the next thing. But if anybody has suggestions, certainly feel free to throw them out. And if I do more of this, it will be probably disparate single issues like this of things, as opposed to going chronologically issue by issue through a thing. Again, never say never. I'm not saying I wouldn't do that with a thing that, with Spawn Year might be fun to do that with, in a more, off the cuff, not non-narrative sort of way, but just like this, where we just sit down and look at the issue together, and I don't even know what's going to happen in it, and just chat about it as I go along. This was different because I have read this before, of course. But anyway, One Doomed Game Critic, once again, honestly, a follow-up to the HBO show might be interesting if we're really desperate for Spawn adaptations. Yeah, because that 3rd season is dynamite, and at least what I remember of it from doing Spawn Year, and it ends on kind of a cliffhanger, and it's really sad that it didn't get a 4th season. But we also never got Spawn the animation, and I would like to see that finally come to fruition before we had an HBO season 4, because all of the voiceovers and everything have been in the can for like 20 years or something, and that's still never been picked up by anybody. And you'd think that by now that would have happened from some streaming service, be it HBO or Amazon or somebody. Mark Hamill is in that. He was playing Twitch, I think, and again, recorded all of his lines. The thing never came out. Sorry, just seeing a lot of stuff from the same folks. Once again, One Doom Game Critic, Youngblood ain't worth it in my opinion, just boring. I might still try that first issue at some point, because I've heard it's just bizarre. G-Stone, I got this on Christmas morning because I wanted to read it myself, is maybe what he's saying, after watching Spawn here. Oh, cool, thanks, man. I don't know how I feel about people being inspired to read Spawn by Spawn Year. I have sort of that AVGN thing where it's like, oh no, I'm getting people to look at crappy things. But I also don't encourage people to get a thing just through my lens necessarily. So like if you're really curious about a thing, don't just assume, even though I give you a lot of detail about why I think it's awful, that you might not appreciate a thing more than I did if you actually look at it yourself. Certainly. Oh yes, Thomas Lowe, the Wanda miscarriage. We don't have to talk about that right now. Colossus Rex, they had CNN back then? Yes, we did have CNN back then. Let's now look up CNN and find out when it began, shall we? CNN on Wikipedia. CNN goes back to 1980 on the Turner Broadcasting System. Yep, that's... So for anybody that wanted to know that, that's when CNN begins. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and finish up here. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you had a good time. Philip Kelton, another super chat. Immortal Hulk year. People have that's probably the modern thing I get the most requests for, comic-wise, is Immortal Hulk. Like, that's another thing. It might be cool to sit down and do the first issue, just get my initial impressions and see just if I think it's as great as everybody else says, and then maybe review more of it, the traditional way, actually, sitting down and looking at it and preparing. If I do more of these, they're not going to replace Comic Vault. I will still certainly do reviews like that, but this is admittedly kind of an easy way to sit down and, have some fun live streaming, doing some content, but I think there's some merit to it. I actually really enjoyed doing this, and it's just kind of a different way to look at stuff. And also, I've been wanting to do more of the dramatic reading thing. I read this one a little bit facetiously, but I've done a couple of those with comics before, and it's real fun. This kind of lets me have my cake and eat it, too, where I can do a little bit of, silly performance, maybe sometimes not so silly, and then do a little bit of on-the-fly critiquing. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and bid you farewell, but thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you again real soon. Again, we'll be back to regular content in about a week. There might be some more random streams before that happens, but nothing planned before the beginning of August, of course, and the next month is going to be Request Month. Austin and I are going to be doing our regular request show on Tuesdays, but we're also going to be doing additional requests on Friday instead of the normal kind of potpourri thing that we do Friday nights with sometimes Comic Vault, sometimes commentaries, etc., etc. And I'll also be doing, and hopefully I can get all this in, but I'll also be doing some requested rewinds on Sundays, trying to get some of those things knocked off the list. We'll have one exception to that. Austin and I, and bringing in Aaron from the Genesis Gems, are going to be reviewing a video game that month. We're going to be doing... Do I want to go ahead and reveal that right now? Yeah, if you made it this far in the video, I'll go ahead and let you know about it. We're doing the old Batman Begins game from GameCube and PlayStation 2 and Xbox. I've been playing through that, and that'll be fun to talk about. So that's the one exception. Unless I end up reviewing any new movies or anything, but I haven't been able to get to the theater, and still don't know if I'm going to review any of the stuff that's in the theater right now before it comes to video. But anyway, I'm just kind of playing things by ear right now. Really busy month for me and my family. I had 3 kids with a birthday in the same week. I had to take Jason on 2 different dance trips. So much going on this month, but it was a lot of fun to just sit down and relax with you guys and read this issue and talk about it. So anyway, once again, I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me your opinion about this as a concept for videos. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan. Happy reading. I'll see you again next time, folks.